Hello, wonderful friends. I'm Lara Replica, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you to our channel. Whether you're a new subscriber just joining us or one of our amazing longtime supporters, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. This channel is all about sharing ideas, inspiration, and creativity, and you are such an important part of making this journey so special. To our new subscribers, welcome to the family. We're so excited to have you here and can't wait for you to explore everything we've created. Whether it's your first video or your 50th, I hope you find something here that makes you smile, think, or dream a little bigger. And to all our loyal subscribers, thank you, thank you, thank you. Your continued support means the world to us. Every like, every share, every moment you spend watching our content helps us grow and reach more people like you. Now, here's something I'd love to share with you. We read every single comment you leave on our videos. Your thoughts, your feedback, and your stories inspire us every day. So don't hold back. Leave a comment. Let us know what you loved, what you'd like to see next, or just say hi. Your input helps shape our channel, and we're here to listen. You're not just viewers, you're part of our creative family. Let's keep growing, learning, and creating together. Here's to new adventures, endless possibilities, and a community that lifts each other up. Thank you again for being here. You're amazing, and I can't wait to see where this journey takes us. With all my gratitude, Lara Replica. LoveSync is a romance comedy audiobook written by Lara Replica. We hope you enjoy and welcome your comments. Chapter 1: Coffee, Chaos, and Code. Seattle was a city that wore its quirks like a hand-knit scarf. Comfortable, vibrant, and a little unpredictable. Sophie Carter loved everything about it, from the smell of fresh roasted coffee wafting through Pike Place Market to the way locals braved the rain without an umbrella, as if defying the weather made them stronger. Today, however, Sophie wasn't exactly feeling the love. Today, she was running late. Her messenger bag thudded against her hip as she darted through the busy streets, clutching a precariously balanced latte in one hand and her laptop in the other. The morning air was crisp, and the city hummed with its usual symphony of car horns, distant buskers, and the occasional bark of a dog. Sophie had exactly 10 minutes to snag her favorite corner table at Java Haven, a cafe she affectionately called her genius zone. Inside, the familiar warmth and aroma of espresso greeted her like an old friend. She let out a relieved sigh. Here, surrounded by the soft hum of conversations and the comforting hiss of the espresso machine, she could tackle anything, from debugging complex algorithms to dreaming up her next big app idea. Just as Sophie made her way toward her usual spot, disaster struck. Nathan Wright was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a navy blazer that looked as if it had been tailored by someone who understood the value of perfection. He was on his way out of the cafe, balancing his phone, a sleek leather briefcase, and a steaming cup of coffee. Sophie barely registered his presence before. Splat! The collision was a chaotic blur of motion. Coffee splattered like modern art across Sophie's laptop. Nathan's phone hit the floor with an alarming clatter, and Sophie's latte, in an act of ultimate betrayal, splashed over her shoes. "My laptop," Sophie gasped, staring at the dripping device in her hands. "Everything I've been working on is on here." Nathan blinked, clearly caught between mortification and disbelief. "I'm terribly sorry. Let me..." "Fix it?" Sophie cut him off, her voice high-pitched with panic. "Can you code a new prototype for an app I've spent 6 months perfecting? Because unless you have some miracle software repair kit in that fancy briefcase of yours, I think we're past sorry." Nathan crouched to retrieve his phone, inspecting it with the careful precision of someone handling a priceless artifact. "Well," he said slowly, "this is unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Sophie echoed, her voice tinged with incredulity. "Unfortunate is forgetting your umbrella in a rainstorm. This is catastrophic." Nathan glanced at her laptop, then at his coffee cup, now sadly empty. "You're right," he said, standing up straighter. "It is catastrophic for both of us." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "Your phone still works. My laptop looks like it went swimming in a caramel macchiato." The barista, who had clearly seen her fair share of coffee-related calamities, slid a napkin dispenser toward them with an air of practiced indifference. Sophie snatched a handful of napkins and began dabbing at her laptop, muttering something about arrogant men with oversized coffees. Nathan cleared his throat, his expression softening. I truly didn't mean for this to happen. Please let me make it up to you. I'll cover the repair costs, or replace it if it can't be fixed. Sophie paused her frantic dabbing, glancing up at him. You'd better, because this isn't just a laptop. This is my career. Nathan held up his hands in surrender, his hazel eyes earnest. Understood, and I insist on buying you a new coffee as a small apology. It's the least I can do. Sophie hesitated, her annoyance warring with the faintest flicker of amusement. Fine, but make it a large one with extra whipped cream. Nathan smiled, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Consider it done. Chapter 2, The Bed is Brewed. Sophie sat at a corner table in Java Haven, watching Nathan navigate the coffee line. He had offered to handle the replacement order, and she'd reluctantly agreed, though she still wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because his apology had seemed genuinely heartfelt, or maybe it was because she hadn't had her morning caffeine fix yet. As Nathan returned, balancing 2 steaming cups of coffee and a plate of pastries, Sophie raised an eyebrow. I only asked for coffee. What's this? A peace offering, Nathan said, setting the plate down with an air of triumph. Chocolate croissant. I figured if caffeine won't cure the situation, chocolate might. Sophie stared at him, the corners of her mouth twitching despite herself. You're surprisingly thoughtful for someone who just ruined my life. Nathan chuckled, settling into the chair across from her. You're surprisingly dramatic for someone whose laptop still has a chance of recovery. Sophie narrowed her eyes, though her annoyance was quickly fading into curiosity. Do you always have a comeback for everything? Only when I'm trying to make up for spilling coffee on someone's prized possession, Nathan replied, flashing her a grin. Despite herself, Sophie laughed, a soft, reluctant sound that caught her off guard. Fine, I'll admit you've made an excellent start, but you still owe me a working laptop. Agreed, Nathan said, raising his coffee cup like a toast. As Sophie took a sip of her drink, she studied him over the rim of her cup. So what's your story, Mr. Coffee Catastrophe? What brings you to this fine establishment? Nathan leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Work, mostly. I'm a management consultant, which means I spend most of my time convincing companies to fix problems they already know they have. And here I thought you might be a secret coffee artist, Sophie said, gesturing to the remnants of their earlier disaster. Nathan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Not quite. And you? What were you working on before I so rudely interrupted? Sophie's face lit up, her earlier frustration momentarily forgotten. It's an app I've been developing, LoveSync. It's designed to pair people based on compatibility factors that go beyond just looks or hobbies. It uses data to predict long-term potential, kind of like hacking love. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Hacking love? Sounds ambitious. Or impossible. It's not impossible, Sophie said, leaning forward. It's science. Love isn't some random force. It's a series of patterns. Emotional, psychological, even biological. With the right algorithm, you can predict connection. Nathan gave her a skeptical look. That's one way to look at it. But love isn't just logic. It's timing, chemistry, all the messy stuff you can't measure with data. Sophie crossed her arms, her competitive streak kicking in. Sounds like someone who's never tried online dating. I haven't, Nathan admitted with a shrug, but I've seen enough of my friends' disasters to know it's more miss than hit. Sophie tilted her head, a sly smile creeping onto her face. You don't believe in love algorithms? Fine, let's make a bet. Nathan leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. I'll find your perfect match using LoveSync, Sophie said, her confidence growing. Give me 30 days. If the app works, you have to publicly endorse it, post about it, write a glowing review, the whole deal. And if it doesn't? Nathan asked, his tone equal parts amusement and challenge. Then I'll admit on my blog that love isn't programmable, Sophie said. And, she hesitated, her competitive streak warring with her pride, I'll agree to go on a date of your choosing. Nathan's eyes sparkled with mischief. Deal. They shook hands across the table, sealing the bet with a touch of playful tension. Let's see what your app can do, Nathan said, leaning back with a smirk. Oh, it'll work, Sophie replied, her confidence unwavering. But as she looked at Nathan's challenging expression, a tiny flicker of doubt crept in. What had she just gotten herself into? Chapter 3. data and disasters. The next morning, Sophie sat cross-legged on her couch, her hair tied in a messy bun and her laptop perched precariously on a cushion. Miraculously, the coffee incident hadn't destroyed it entirely. The repair technician had worked magic, and while a few files were lost, her main project, LoveSync, was intact. Nathan's profile sat open on her screen, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with data. Sophie sipped her tea thoughtfully. The first step in creating his profile was gathering enough details to feed the app's algorithm. She needed honesty, depth, and precision. Unfortunately, she suspected Nathan wasn't the type to easily bare his soul. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. A text from Nathan popped up. "Ready for your first set of answers. Brace yourself." A moment later, another message arrived. Name, Nathan Wright. Age 32. Occupation, professional coffee spiller. Sophie rolled her eyes, her fingers flying over the keyboard in response. Hilarious. Try again. I need real answers, something I can actually use. His reply came almost instantly. Fine, but don't complain when you realize I'm not as boring as I look. Minutes later, Nathan's answers began trickling in. Name, Nathan Wright. Age, 32. Favorite hobby, hiking, preferably where there's no Wi-Fi. Pet peeve, people who overuse hashtags. Biggest fear, heights. But I'd never admit that in public. Best quality, I'm a great listener, especially when the conversation is about me. Worst quality, I'm competitive. See this bet. Dream date, something spontaneous like a road trip to nowhere. Sophie smiled despite herself. His answers weren't just helpful, they were unexpectedly charming. She opened the app and began inputting his details, tweaking a few settings to ensure the matches would reflect his preferences. The app's design was sleek and intuitive, the culmination of months of coding and testing. A progress bar flickered to life on the screen, the words "Analyzing Profile" glowing softly beneath it. As Sophie worked, her best friend Maya barged in, carrying a takeout bag that smelled like heaven. "Don't tell me you're still obsessing over that app," Maya said, plopping down on the couch. "I thought you were going to take a break after the coffee debacle." "This isn't just work," Sophie replied, handing Maya a fork. "It's a bet. If I can prove to Nathan that LoveSync works, it could mean huge publicity for the app." Maya raised an eyebrow, digging into her takeout. "Nathan? As in the coffee spiller? Please tell me you're not falling for the guy who nearly ruined your career." "Of course not," Sophie said quickly, though her cheeks flushed. "This is strictly professional. And besides, he's convinced love can't be measured. I'm going to prove him wrong." "Uh-huh," Maya said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "And what happens if you lose?" "I won't," Sophie said, though the thought made her stomach twist. Maya grinned. "You're playing with fire, my friend. But I'll admit, it's fun watching you get all worked up over this guy." "I'm not worked up," Sophie protested. "Sure you're not." Maya winked, tossing a napkin at her. Meanwhile, across town, Nathan sat in his sleek, minimalist apartment, his phone buzzing with notifications. He ignored them, instead scrolling through a list of suggested matches Sophie had sent him. "Vanessa, 29, yoga instructor," he muttered aloud. "Likes hiking, reading, and stargazing. Seems promising." His skepticism remained intact, but he had to admit Sophie's app was impressive. The interface was simple, and the matches seemed thoughtful, at least on the surface. As he stared at the screen, a notification popped up. "Match found. Vanessa has agreed to meet. Suggested venue, Silver Lake Cafe, Friday at 7 p.m. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Here goes nothing. Friday night mishap. The Silver Lake Cafe was charming, with soft lighting and the faint hum of live acoustic music. Nathan arrived early, determined to make a good impression. He spotted Vanessa immediately. She was seated by the window, her long dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. "Vanessa?" Nathan asked, approaching the table. She looked up with a warm smile. "Nathan, nice to meet you." They exchanged pleasantries, and for a while the conversation flowed smoothly. Vanessa was kind, intelligent, and easy to talk to. But as the evening wore on, it became clear that something was missing. "So," Vanessa said, twirling her straw, "where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Nathan hesitated. "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. What about you?" "Oh, I have it all planned out," Vanessa said brightly. "In 5 years, I'll be married, living in a countryside home, and running a dog rescue." Nathan nodded, but inwardly he felt a twinge of doubt. She was lovely, but her vision of the future felt rigid. By the time dessert arrived, it was clear the date wasn't destined for a second round. They parted amicably, but Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie's app might not be as foolproof as she claimed. Back at Sophie's apartment, Sophie was waiting eagerly for Nathan's feedback when her phone buzzed. His text was short and to the point. "Nathan, Vanessa was great, but not my match. App might need a few tweaks. Let's try again." Sophie frowned at the message, her competitive streak flaring. She wasn't going to let one lukewarm date derail her bet. "Challenge accepted," she muttered, opening her laptop. Chapter 4. The Algorithm Strikes Back. Sophie leaned back in her chair, staring at her laptop. Nathan's feedback had stung more than she cared to admit, but she wasn't about to give up. "Not his match," she muttered, typing furiously. "We'll see about that." The glow of her screen illuminated her determined face as she combed through the app's settings. She fine-tuned the weight of compatibility metrics, tweaking values for spontaneity, sense of humor, and adaptability, qualities Nathan had unwittingly revealed during their conversations. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, Sophie had a new batch of matches ready. With a groggy but triumphant smile, she hit send on the notification to Nathan's account. Nathan's second date. Later that week, Nathan found himself sitting in a quirky taco restaurant with his next LoveSync match, Hannah, a marketing executive with an infectious laugh and an adventurous spirit. "This place is great," Hannah said, glancing around at the colorful decor and string lights. "I love a good taco night." Nathan smiled, relaxing in her easygoing presence. "Yeah, it's one of my favorites. And apparently, they have a salsa so spicy they make you sign a waiver." Hannah gasped, her eyes widening with excitement. "We have to try it." Nathan hesitated. "You sure? I heard it's basically liquid fire." Hannah grinned. "Absolutely. Life's too short not to take a few risks." As the evening progressed, Nathan found himself genuinely enjoying Hannah's company. She was fun, spontaneous, and a great conversationalist. But just when he thought the date was going smoothly, the waiter brought out the infamous ghost pepper inferno salsa. "This is it," Hannah said, eyeing the bowl with equal parts awe and trepidation. "Ready?" Nathan picked up a chip, dunked it into the fiery red sauce, and took a bite. For a moment, he was fine, and then it hit him. "Wow," he managed to choke out, his face turning a shade of red that rivaled the salsa. Hannah burst into laughter, tears streaming down her face as she took her own bite. "This is insane!" By the time the meal ended, both of them were fanning their mouths and gulping water like marathon runners. Despite the burning sensation, Nathan couldn't help but laugh. When they said their goodbyes, Nathan felt a flicker of doubt. The date had been fun, more fun than he'd had in a long time, but something still felt off. The check-in. Second date down, Nathan texted Sophie later that night. Sophie, who was in the middle of devouring a bowl of popcorn while watching a coding tutorial, immediately put her snack aside to reply. Sophie, "And? How'd it go?" Nathan, "Great person, great tacos, terrifying salsa." But, Sophie. But, Nathan, still no spark. Sophie groaned, flopping onto her couch. "This man is impossible," she muttered. Determined to figure out what was missing, she decided it was time for a new approach, a new perspective. The next day, Sophie called in reinforcements. "I need your help," she said to Maya, who was lounging on Sophie's couch with a cup of iced coffee. Maya raised an eyebrow. "You asking for help? This must be serious." "It is," Sophie said, pacing the room. "Nathan's gone on 2 great dates with perfectly compatible matches, and he's still not satisfied. What am I missing?" "Maybe the problem isn't your app," Maya suggested, twirling her straw thoughtfully. "Maybe it's Nathan." Sophie stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" Maya shrugged. "Think about it. He's looking for something he can't describe, something your algorithm can't measure. Maybe he doesn't even know what he wants." Sophie frowned. Maya had a point, but instead of discouraging her, it sparked a new idea. "What if I tweak the algorithm to account for intangibles?" Sophie mused aloud. Maya snorted. "Intangibles? Like what? Magic?" "Sort of," Sophie said, her mind racing. "Chemistry, timing, the unpredictable stuff that makes love messy and real. I can't measure it directly, but I can introduce variability into the matches, make them less perfect on paper, but more dynamic." "Sounds risky," Maya said, "but hey, go for it. Worst case, you lose the bet and have to let Mr. Tall, dark, and skeptical pick your next date." Sophie glared at her, not helping. The twist match. Armed with her new insights, Sophie revamped Nathan's profile once again. This time, instead of aiming for perfection, she introduced a wild card, a match with qualities that complemented rather than mirrored his. A day later, Nathan received the notification. Match found. Emma, 31, travel blogger. Suggested venue, Mystery Escape Room, Saturday at 3 p.m. Nathan raised an eyebrow at the suggestion but accepted the match anyway. If nothing else, it would be an interesting afternoon. Saturday shenanigans. The escape room was themed after an old-fashioned detective story, complete with hidden compartments, coded messages, and dim lighting. Emma was energetic and full of ideas, bouncing from clue to clue with infectious enthusiasm. "Try that key over there," she exclaimed, pointing to a dusty bookshelf. Nathan followed her lead, unlocking a hidden drawer. Inside was a riddle, which they solved together in a flurry of brainstorming and laughter. By the time they escaped the room, they were both grinning like kids who had just solved a treasure hunt. "That was amazing," Emma said, high-fiving Nathan. "You're pretty good at this." "You weren't so bad yourself," Nathan replied, feeling a genuine connection for the first time since the bet began. Still, as they said their goodbyes, Nathan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that while the date had been fun, it wasn't the one. Sophie's realization. When Nathan reported back, Sophie was torn between frustration and curiosity. Why wasn't the app working for him? As she reviewed the data, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Every time Nathan described his ideal match, the qualities sounded eerily familiar. Spontaneous, sarcastic, driven. Sophie's stomach flipped as a wild thought crossed her mind. Could it be her? Chapter 5. The Realization. Sophie paced back and forth in her apartment, her mind replaying the feedback Nathan had given after his third date. Each time he described what he was looking for, the description seemed to echo qualities she saw in herself. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "That's ridiculous. He's just being vague." But the more she thought about it, the harder it became to ignore. Nathan's preference for someone driven, someone who challenged him, someone with a sense of humor that matched his own, it all lined up too perfectly. Maya, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her ever-present iced coffee, watched Sophie with an amused expression. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor at this rate." "I think the algorithm's broken," Sophie blurted out, throwing her hands in the air. Maya snorted. "Or maybe it's working a little too well." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sophie asked. Spinning around to face her, Maya raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of her coffee for dramatic effect. "You're smart, Soph. Figure it out." Sophie froze, her heart skipping a beat. "You're not saying..." Maya smirked. "I'm just saying maybe the reason he hasn't found the right match yet is because he's already met her." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Sophie felt a strange mix of excitement and panic. Nathan's fourth date. Determined to prove her feelings were just a result of overthinking, Sophie threw herself into organizing another date for Nathan. She meticulously adjusted the algorithm, focusing on balance and compatibility. The next match was Lauren, a witty journalist with a passion for environmental causes. The date took place at an outdoor charity event, a cause both Nathan and Lauren could appreciate. From the start, the two of them hit it off, laughing over carnival games and bonding over their shared disdain for single-use plastics. As the evening progressed, Sophie received updates through the app. The compatibility score between Nathan and Lauren was the highest yet, and Sophie told herself this was it, the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. But then her phone buzzed with a new notification. "Nathan, Lauren's amazing, but..." Sophie groaned, reading the rest of the message. "Nathan, it still doesn't feel right. I can't explain it." Throwing her phone onto the couch, Sophie collapsed next to it, staring at the ceiling. "Why can't this just work?" she mumbled. The unexpected invitation. The following day, Sophie's phone rang. It was Nathan. "Hey," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. "I need your help with something." Sophie sat up straight, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "I'm supposed to attend a company gala tomorrow night, and I need a +1. My boss thinks it's embarrassing to show up alone and, well..." He trailed off, sounding uncharacteristically uncertain. "And you're asking me?" Sophie asked, her heart doing a little flip. "Why not?" Nathan replied, regaining his usual confidence. "You've spent more time analyzing my love life than anyone else. Plus, I owe you for the laptop incident. Sophie hesitated. Spending an evening with Nathan in a non-work-related setting felt dangerous. But before she could overthink it, the words tumbled out. All right, I'll go. Great, I'll pick you up at 7, Nathan said, and Sophie could almost hear the smile in his voice. The gala. When Nathan arrived the next evening, Sophie was waiting in a sleek emerald green dress that hugged her figure just enough to make her feel confident but comfortable. Nathan, dressed in a sharp black suit, paused when he saw her. Wow, he said, his tone genuine. You look incredible. Sophie blushed, brushing off the compliment. Clean up pretty well yourself. The gala was held in an opulent ballroom, with chandeliers casting a golden glow over the crowd. As Nathan and Sophie mingled, they fell into an easy rhythm, their banter drawing smiles from everyone they met. At one point, Sophie caught Nathan watching her with a thoughtful expression. What? She asked, feeling self-conscious. Nothing, he said quickly, then added with a small smile, I just realized this is the most fun I've had at one of these things. As the evening wore on, Sophie found herself forgetting about the bet, the algorithm, and even the app itself. Being with Nathan felt natural, like they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. When the music shifted to a slow song, Nathan held out his hand. Dance with me? Sophie hesitated for a split second before placing her hand in his. Just don't step on my feet, she teased. Nathan chuckled. No promises. As they swayed to the music, Sophie couldn't help but notice how perfectly they fit together. For the first time, she let herself wonder, what if the right match for Nathan wasn't a stranger? What if it was her? The morning after. The next morning, Sophie sat at her kitchen table, replaying the events of the gala in her mind. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. Nathan, thanks for last night. I couldn't have made it through without you. Sophie smiled, typing back. Sophie, you're welcome. It was surprisingly fun. But as she hit send, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. The bet was still in play, and Nathan was expecting her to find him a match. Could she really tell him the truth, that her own app was pointing back at her? Chapter 6. Testing the Waters. Sophie decided to put her swirling emotions on hold and focus on the task at hand, finding Nathan's perfect match, or at least convincing herself she wasn't it. The gala had left her with more questions than answers, but she told herself it was just an evening, a moment, nothing more. Nathan, on the other hand, had started to view Sophie in a new light. The ease with which they navigated the gala, their shared laughter, the way she could take his sarcasm and dish it right back. It was unsettling, and strangely, comforting. But he wasn't one to jump to conclusions, especially when it came to something as unpredictable as love. A new match. A new hope. The algorithm was recalibrated, this time with Sophie's intangibles tweak front and center. She reviewed the profiles carefully, landing on Rachel, a nonprofit director who seemed to tick every box in Nathan's profile. She sent him the match with a simple message, Sophie, this one might surprise you. Dinner at La Luna Bistro tomorrow at 7 p.m. Nathan replied almost immediately. Nathan, no salsa disasters this time? Sophie, no promises, just go. Rachel and the perfect imperfection. Nathan arrived at La Luna Bistro, a cozy yet sophisticated restaurant, and spotted Rachel right away. She was poised and elegant with a warm smile that immediately put him at ease. The conversation flowed naturally. She shared stories about her travels, her passion for helping others, and even a few embarrassing moments that made her more relatable. Halfway through the evening, Nathan found himself thinking, this could work. Rachel was everything he thought he wanted. Intelligent, kind, and grounded. When he texted Sophie later that night, his message was both hopeful and hesitant. Nathan, Rachel was great. Definitely the best so far. Let's see how the second date goes. Sophie read the text and felt a strange pang in her chest. It was what she wanted to hear, what she needed to hear for the bet. So why did it feel like a punch to the gut? Doubt creeps in. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan and Rachel went on several dates. Sophie kept her distance, focusing on fine-tuning the app and convincing herself that Nathan's happiness was all that mattered. But every time her phone buzzed with an update from Nathan, she couldn't shake the growing ache in her heart. Meanwhile, Maya was less than convinced by Sophie's self-imposed emotional exile. You're practically shoving him into Rachel's arms. Maya said, sprawled on Sophie's couch one evening. "If you like him, why aren't you doing anything about it?" "Because it's not about me," Sophie insisted. "This is about the app, the bet, and proving I can make this work." Maya gave her a pointed look. "You're proving something, all right, just not to him." Nathan's confusion. Despite how well things were going with Rachel, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She was perfect on paper, and their dates were enjoyable, but there was no spark, no fire. It wasn't Rachel's fault, she was wonderful, but every time he was with her, he found himself thinking about Sophie. Her quick wit, her fiery determination, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her app. The realization hit him like a freight train one evening as he sat across from Rachel, listening to her talk about her latest project. He liked her, but he didn't feel anything beyond that. The unexpected reboot after Rachel ended things amicably, admitting she felt they were better as friends. Nathan texted Sophie, "Nathan, Rachel called it quits. Guess your algorithm still has some bugs." Sophie stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She wanted to feel relieved, but instead, all she felt was guilt. Had she sabotaged her own app by tweaking it too much? Or was the problem that no one could measure up to the chemistry Nathan and she shared? A new challenge determined to redeem herself and avoid her feelings, Sophie poured her energy into one last attempt to find Nathan's match. She called it Operation Perfection. The app would generate a short list of candidates based on every insight she'd gathered from Nathan's previous dates. "Are you sure this is about him?" Maya teased as Sophie obsessively ran simulations. "Yes," Sophie lied, her voice unconvincing even to herself. The wild card. Among the final matches, one stood out, Kelsey, an artist with a penchant for the unconventional. She seemed like the complete opposite of what Nathan had described as his type. But something about her profile intrigued Sophie. "This one's a stretch," she muttered as she hit send. Nathan's reply was instantaneous. "Nathan, an artist? Bold move, Carter. Let's see what happens." Kelsey's chaos. Nathan met Kelsey at a pop-up art exhibit, and from the moment she greeted him with a paint-smudged handshake, he knew this was going to be different. Kelsey was vibrant, unpredictable, and full of stories about her adventures. Their date was a whirlwind of laughter and spontaneity, culminating in Kelsey dragging Nathan onto the exhibit floor to help her paint a collaborative masterpiece. By the end of the evening, Nathan was grinning like a kid. But even as he said goodbye, he knew this wasn't it. Kelsey was fun, but she wasn't the person he couldn't stop thinking about. The breaking point. As Sophie analyzed the data from Nathan's dates, her frustration boiled over. No matter how many times she recalibrated, no match felt right. And then it hit her. Maybe it wasn't the algorithm that was flawed. Maybe love wasn't meant to be calculated at all. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Nathan. "Nathan, can we talk? I think we've been looking for the wrong thing." Sophie stared at the screen, her heart in her throat. Was he finally coming to the same conclusion she had? Chapter 7. The Talk. Sophie's heart pounded as she read Nathan's message. "Can we talk? I think we've been looking for the wrong thing. Was this it? Was he finally going to say what she'd been too afraid to admit to herself? Or was she misreading the situation entirely?" She typed back quickly, keeping it casual despite her nerves. "Sophie? Sure. Coffee at Java Haven? Nathan? Perfect. Tomorrow at noon." The next day, Sophie arrived early, the familiar hum of Java Haven doing little to calm her racing thoughts. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, watching the door like it might reveal the answers she couldn't figure out on her own. When Nathan walked in, looking as confident and put together as ever, Sophie felt a strange mix of relief and panic. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," Sophie said, trying to sound breezy. "What's on your mind?" Nathan leaned forward, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "I've been thinking a lot about this whole experiment, the app, the dates, everything, and I think I've been approaching it all wrong." Sophie's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I've been so focused on finding someone who checks all the boxes that I've been ignoring the bigger picture. Love isn't about perfection, it's about connection, and I think I've been missing something or someone who was right in front of me all along." Sophie's breath caught. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? But before she could respond, Nathan continued. I want to stop the search. No more profiles, no more matches. I think I need to figure things out on my own. Sophie's chest tightened. She nodded, forcing a smile even as disappointment swelled within her. If that's what you want, I understand. Nathan's gaze lingered on her, like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Thanks for everything, Sophie, he said softly. You're incredible. You know that, right? Sophie blinked back the sting of tears. You're not so bad yourself, right? And with that, he left, leaving Sophie alone with a heart full of questions. Chapter 8. A Fork in the Road. Over the next few weeks, Sophie threw herself into her work. She revamped the app, addressed bugs, and prepared for a big investor pitch. But no matter how busy she kept herself, her thoughts kept drifting back to Nathan. Meanwhile, Nathan tried to move on. He spent time with friends, buried himself in work, and told himself he was doing the right thing. But no matter how hard he tried to focus, his thoughts always circled back to Sophie. Her laugh, her stubborn determination, the way she made him feel like he could be himself. One evening, Nathan found himself at Silver Lake Cafe, the place where he'd gone on one of his earlier dates. The memory made him smile, but it also brought a realization he could no longer ignore. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Chapter 9. The Unexpected Call. Sophie was at home, halfway through a bowl of instant ramen, when her phone buzzed. Seeing Nathan's name on the screen made her heart skip a beat. Hello? She said, trying to keep her voice steady. Hey, Nathan said. His voice was warm but hesitant, as if he wasn't sure what to say. Are you busy? Not really, Sophie replied, pushing her ramen aside. What's up? I was wondering, could we meet? There's something I need to tell you. Sophie's pulse quickened. Sure. Where? How about the park near your place? In an hour. Okay, Sophie said, her voice soft. I'll see you there. Chapter 10. Confessions in the Park. The park was quiet, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting everything in a warm golden glow. Sophie spotted Nathan near a bench by the fountain, his hands in his pockets as he stared at the water. Hey, she said as she approached. He turned, his face lighting up with a small smile. Hey. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the park filling the space between them. Finally, Nathan spoke. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, about the app, the bet, and us. Sophie's heart pounded. And, Nathan turned to face her, his expression earnest. You were right. Love isn't random, but it's not something you can calculate either. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes it takes you by surprise. Sophie's breath hitched as he continued. You're the one I can't stop thinking about, Sophie. You're the one who challenges me, who makes me laugh, who makes me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Her eyes filled with tears, but she managed a smile. Took you long enough, Nathan chuckled, reaching for her hand. So, what do you think? Can we call off the bet and see where this goes? Sophie squeezed his hand, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. I think the algorithm got it right after all. And as the sun set over the park, their laughter filled the air, marking the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both knew was exactly what they'd been searching for. Chapter 11. New Beginnings. Sophie and Nathan spent the next few weeks navigating the delicate transition from friends and former rivals in a bet to something more. At first, it was awkward. They fumbled over text messages, second-guessed casual touches, and overanalyzed every interaction. But with each passing day, the awkwardness melted away, replaced by an ease that felt natural, like they had always been meant to find each other. One evening, Nathan showed up at Sophie's apartment with takeout and a sheepish grin. I figured since you've been practically living on ramen, I'd save you from yourself, he said, holding up a bag from her favorite Thai place. Sophie laughed, opening the door wider to let him in. You're not wrong. Come in, savior of my diet. As they ate, their conversation flowed effortlessly, from Nathan's latest work drama to Sophie's excitement about the upcoming investor pitch for LoveSync. I still think you're brave for putting your heart into this app, Nathan said, leaning back on the couch. Even after everything. Sophie shrugged, though his words warmed her. It's not just about the app anymore. It's about proving that love, no matter how messy or unpredictable, is worth believing in. Nathan smiled, his eyes soft. You don't need an algorithm to prove that. You just proved it to me. Chapter 12. Trouble on the Horizon. As Sophie prepared for her investor pitch, she found herself busier than ever. The app was performing well, and her analytics showed promising user engagement, but the pressure to secure funding weighed heavily on her. Nathan, ever the supportive partner, offered to help. "Let me sit in on one of your practice runs," he suggested. Sophie hesitated. "Are you sure? I tend to get a little intense." Nathan grinned. "I've seen you yell at your laptop for not compiling code fast enough. I think I can handle it." But as Sophie practiced her pitch in front of Nathan, he couldn't help but notice a flaw in her strategy. "You're focusing too much on the algorithm," he said after her run-through. "Investors don't just want to see numbers. They want to know the story behind it, why it matters, how it connects people. That's what sets you apart." Sophie frowned, chewing her lip. "You think I'm not telling the right story?" "I think you're not telling your story," Nathan said gently. His words struck a chord, and Sophie realized he was right. She spent the rest of the night reworking her pitch, determined to get it just right. The pitch. On the day of the investor meeting, Sophie stood in front of a sleek conference room full of sharp-eyed venture capitalists. Her palms were sweaty, but she took a deep breath, remembering Nathan's advice. She started with the data, showcasing the app's success. But then she pivoted, sharing her personal journey, her belief that love was more than just chance, her own experiences testing the app, and how it had led her to something unexpected and real. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before the lead investor leaned forward, a smile spreading across his face. Impressive. Not just the technology, but the heart behind it. Count us in. Sophie felt a wave of relief and excitement as she walked out of the building, her phone already buzzing with messages from Nathan. "Nathan, how'd it go?" "Sophie, we're funded. Drinks are on me tonight." Chapter 13. A Rift in the Algorithm. As Sophie celebrated her victory, cracks began to form in her and Nathan's seemingly perfect relationship. It started small, an unanswered text here, a missed call there. Nathan was swamped with work, and Sophie was consumed by the next phase of the app's rollout. One evening, as they finally sat down for dinner, the tension boiled over. "You're always working," Nathan said, his tone sharper than he intended. "Even when we're together, your mind's somewhere else." Sophie bristled. "I could say the same about you. Do you know how many times you've canceled plans in the past month?" "I'm trying to build something here, Sophie," Nathan shot back. "So am I," Sophie snapped. "Or did you forget that LoveSync is the reason we even know each other?" Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's exactly the point. If it wasn't for the app, would we even be here?" His words hit Sophie like a punch to the gut. She stared at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you really think this is just about the app?" Nathan hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. "I don't know. Maybe we rushed into this." Sophie stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "If you don't know, then maybe you need to figure it out." Chapter 14. Separate Paths. The next few weeks were painful. Sophie threw herself into work, avoiding Nathan's texts and calls. Nathan, too, buried himself in his job, trying to make sense of his doubts. But as time passed, they both realized that no matter how busy they kept themselves, they couldn't stop thinking about each other. Nathan found himself at the park, where they'd had their first real conversation, replaying her words in his mind. Meanwhile, Sophie stared at the app she'd worked so hard to create, wondering why it felt so hollow without Nathan by her side. Chapter 15. The Turning Point. One evening, Sophie's phone buzzed with a notification from LoveSync. New match found. Compatibility 98%. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding as she opened the profile. Her breath caught. It was Nathan. Sophie laughed through her tears, a strange mix of relief and disbelief. The algorithm wasn't just about numbers. It had seen what she'd been too afraid to admit all along. Taking a deep breath, she sent him a message. "Sophie, the app says we're a match. Want to test it one more time?" Minutes later, her phone buzzed with his reply. "Nathan, I thought you'd never ask." Chapter 16. One Last Test. Sophie sat at their usual table in Java Haven, nervously tapping her fingers against her coffee cup. She'd asked Nathan to meet her there, and though his reply had been immediate, the minutes felt like hours as she waited. When the door finally opened and Nathan stepped inside, his familiar, confident stride sent a wave of warmth through her chest. He spotted her and smiled. a tentative but genuine expression that melted away some of her nerves. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from her. "Hey," Sophie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken questions and lingering emotions. Finally, Nathan broke it. "I've missed you," he said simply. Sophie's heart swelled, but she forced herself to stay focused. "Nathan, before we say anything else, I need to tell you something. The app, it matched us." Nathan blinked, surprised. "It did?" She nodded. "I know it's just an algorithm, but it's not wrong. You're the one I want. You've been the one for a while now, even when I was too stubborn or scared to admit it." Nathan leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Sophie, I've been a fool. I let my own doubts and insecurities get in the way of what was right in front of me. I don't need an app to tell me what I already know." Sophie's breath hitched. "What do you know?" "I know that I love you," Nathan said, his voice steady. Tears pricked at Sophie's eyes as she smiled. "I love you too, Nathan." They reached for each other's hands across the table, their fingers intertwining. It felt like coming home. Chapter 17, Rebuilding Together. With their relationship back on track, Sophie and Nathan made a pact to communicate better, to prioritize their connection amidst their busy lives. Nathan supported Sophie as LoveSync officially launched, attending events and even volunteering to speak about his experiences with the app. "It's not just about numbers," he told a packed audience at the launch party. "It's about helping people find the courage to connect." Meanwhile, Sophie found herself learning to trust Nathan fully. She let him see her vulnerabilities, the parts of herself she usually kept hidden. In return, Nathan opened up about his own fears, his hesitations about love, and how Sophie had shattered his preconceived notions. Chapter 18, A Curveball. Just as everything seemed to fall into place, Sophie received an unexpected email from a tech giant interested in acquiring LoveSync. The offer was generous, life-changing even, but it came with a catch. Sophie would need to relocate to San Francisco to lead the project under their umbrella. When she told Nathan, his reaction was unreadable. "This is huge," he said finally. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know," Sophie admitted. "It's everything I've worked for. But leaving Seattle, leaving you." She trailed off, her voice breaking. Nathan reached for her hand, his expression serious. "Sophie, I don't want to hold you back. This is your dream, but we need to figure this out together." Chapter 19, Crossroads. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Sophie weighed the pros and cons, consulting with Maya and even her mom, but her heart felt torn. Nathan, too, wrestled with his feelings. He wanted Sophie to chase her dreams, but the thought of being apart from her was unbearable. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking Silver Lake, Sophie spoke the words she'd been dreading. "I think I have to take it." Nathan nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "I understand." "Do you?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. Nathan turned to her, his eyes softening. "I do, but that doesn't mean I'm giving up on us." Sophie's heart ached as she leaned her head against his shoulder. They didn't have all the answers, but for now they had each other. Chapter 20. The leap. Sophie accepted the offer, and within weeks, she was packing up her apartment. Nathan helped her with every step, even as the impending distance loomed over them. On her last night in Seattle, they shared a quiet dinner at home. Nathan surprised her with a gift, a small framed photo of the two of them at the gala, their smiles radiant. "For when you need a reminder of home," he said softly. Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks as she hugged him tightly. "You're my home," she whispered. Chapter 21, Long-Distance Love. San Francisco was a whirlwind. Sophie threw herself into her new role, tackling challenges with the same determination that had fueled her app's creation. But she and Nathan stayed connected through nightly video calls, weekend visits, and endless text messages. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, arguments over time zones, and missed calls, but they always found their way back to each other. Chapter 22. The Proposal. On one of Nathan's visits to San Francisco, he took Sophie to a rooftop overlooking the city. As the sun set, he pulled a small box from his pocket. "Sophie Carter," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I don't need an algorithm or a perfect plan to know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Sophie's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with joy. "Yes," she exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and as they embraced, the city lights sparkled around them. Chapter 23. Love in the details. Sophie hadn't been back to Seattle since she said yes to Nathan's proposal, and now, as she stepped off the plane into the familiar drizzle, she felt a pang of nostalgia. Nathan was waiting for her at the arrivals gate, holding a bouquet of daisies, her favorite. "Welcome home, fiancé," he said, his grin as warm as the coffee in his other hand. Sophie laughed, throwing her arms around him. "You remembered the flowers," she said, burying her face in his shoulder. "Of course," he said, pulling back to kiss her forehead. "Now, let's get you settled in. We've got a wedding to plan." The chaos of planning. Back at Nathan's apartment, a space that had grown cozier since their long-distance relationship began, they dove headfirst into wedding planning. Sophie, ever the overachiever, had created a spreadsheet with everything from caterers to seating charts. Nathan, on the other hand, was more interested in making sure the day reflected their unique story. "Do we really need an ice sculpture?" he teased, scrolling through her list. Sophie swatted him playfully. "It's not an ice sculpture. It's a centerpiece for the dessert table. Besides, it's a small one." Nathan smirked. "I love you, but you know no one's coming to our wedding for the ice." Their planning sessions were punctuated by laughter, debates over silly details, and stolen kisses when one of them grew too stressed. Maya joined in occasionally, offering her sharp wit and honest opinions. "You two are insufferably cute," she said during one brainstorming session. "But if you make me wear anything with sequins, I'm boycotting the wedding." "You'll look stunning," Sophie teased. "Sequins or not." A trip down memory lane. One weekend, they visited the park where they'd had their first real conversation. Nathan had planned a surprise picnic, complete with their favorite takeout and a thermos of hot cocoa. As they sat on the bench overlooking the fountain, Sophie smiled. "It feels like everything started here." Nathan nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "You know, I was scared that day. Scared that I was messing things up with every date you sent me on, scared that I'd never figure it out." "And now?" Sophie asked, resting her head on his shoulder. "Now, I'm just scared I'll forget to pack the rings," he joked, earning a laugh from Sophie. Their laughter echoed through the park, a sound that felt like home. Chapter 24. Facing the Unexpected. With 2 months to go until the wedding, Sophie and Nathan found themselves navigating unexpected hurdles. The venue they'd chosen, a charming garden just outside the city, suddenly canceled due to unforeseen renovations. "I can't believe this," Sophie groaned, staring at the email. "We've already sent out the invitations." Nathan rubbed her back soothingly. "It's going to be okay. We'll find something else." Despite his optimism, the next few weeks were a whirlwind of stress. Every alternative venue was either booked or wildly expensive, and Sophie began to feel the weight of her perfectionism. "I just want everything to be perfect," she admitted one night, her voice breaking. Nathan took her hands, his gaze steady. "It doesn't have to be perfect, Soph. It just has to be us." His words brought tears to her eyes, but also a sense of clarity. They decided to move the wedding to the park where their story began, transforming it into a beautiful, intimate venue with the help of their friends and family. The build-up. As the weeks passed, the park began to take shape. Maya spearheaded the decorations, turning the space into a whimsical blend of fairy lights and floral arrangements. Nathan's best friend Ryan handled logistics, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The preparation brought everyone closer together, and Sophie found herself appreciating the imperfections of the process. One evening, as she and Nathan strung lights around the trees, she paused to watch him. "What?" he asked, catching her gaze. "Nothing," she said, smiling softly. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." Nathan leaned in, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Not as lucky as me." Chapter 25. A Heartfelt Ending. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the Seattle rain taking a rare day off. Sophie stood in a small sunlit room at the edge of the park, slipping into her dress with Maya's help. "You look like a dream," Maya said, her voice unusually soft. Sophie glanced at her reflection, taking in the simple elegance of the gown. For the first time in weeks, she felt at peace. "Thank you," she said, squeezing Maya's hand. Meanwhile, Nathan stood with Ryan by the fountain, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. "Nervous?" Ryan asked. Nathan shook his head, a calm smile on his face. "Not at all." The ceremony. As Sophie walked down the aisle, her heart swelled at the sight of Nathan waiting for her. The park was alive with color and light, the sound of birdsong blending with the soft music playing in the background. When she reached him, Nathan took her hands, his eyes shining. "You're stunning," he whispered. "And you're overdressed," she teased, earning a laugh from the crowd. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, a reflection of their journey together. Nathan spoke of how Sophie had changed his view of love, while Sophie shared how Nathan had taught her to embrace life's unpredictability. The reception. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Maya's speech was equal parts touching and hilarious, while Ryan's toast managed to embarrass Nathan just enough to make everyone laugh. As the evening wound down, Nathan and Sophie stole a moment alone by the fountain. The fairy lights cast a soft glow over the water, and the sound of their guests' laughter faded into the background. "We did it," Sophie said, leaning into Nathan's embrace. "We did," he agreed, his voice warm. Sophie tilted her head to look at him. "Do you think the algorithm would have matched us?" Nathan chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe, but I think we beat the algorithm." Sophie smiled, her heart full. "I think we did too." As they kissed under the soft glow of the lights, the world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the promise of their future together. Messy, unpredictable, and perfect in its own way. Thank you for staying with us till the end. Please remember, we welcome your feedback via your comments and hope you join us again on the next audiobook coming soon. Hope you have a wonderful day further. See you next time.